November 19th, 2019. Please rise, and I'm going to ask Mayor Falanka, whose birthday it is today, and is at this meeting instead of celebrating elsewhere.
Yes.
Please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please call the roll, Debbie.
Commissioner Hurd,
Here, present.
Commissioner Cohn,
Here, present.
Both.
Commissioner Rosenberg,
Here.
Commissioner Falanka, happy
Here.
birthday,
Thank you.
and Acting Commissioner Jackson,
Here.
President Zuckerman.
Present and here. Without objection, I'd like to skip down to some of the other items on the agenda, going to the bottom. We have a request from the Engelman Foundation to hold their annual walkathon at 9 a.m. on Sunday, May 17th. I don't think there's a problem with that. If nobody has an objection, they have a motion and a second to grant that request.
I move on the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We also have a request from the Rye Rec Department to have their participants in the annual Turkey Trot go through Rye Town Park on Saturday, November 30th. There's no discussion. I have a motion and a second on that one.
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We have a, I was going to go to the management report next, to get that through that. We have the tree lighting flyer that I think everybody has seen.
There were public comments. I sent some comments that we received in Rye on the tree lighting flyer.
So let's skip that. We'll get to that. We'll do that in public comments at the same time. So let's go back to the adoption of minutes, which have been hanging over our heads for a long time. And we'll
So,
take them one at a time, please. The minutes of April 16th. I'd like, are there any comments on the minutes of April the 16th? Do they need to be amended in any way?
No, concerns that we had have been reflected.
Okay. Then may I have a motion and a second to accept the minutes of April the 16th?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
The minutes of May the 21st. Do we have any comments or addenda to those minutes?
None.
Then may I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of May 21?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The minutes of July the 23rd.
We do have remaining comments from the city of Rye.
And what are those comments?
The comments are that we had addressed concerns, there was a discussion about the grant applications generally, and then more specifically relating to the parking infrastructure grant, and, or maybe, I guess it was all general. Commissioner Cohn had expressed concerns regarding funding of capital improvements to Rye Town Park that I had echoed. We stated that we were not prepared to spend more on capital expenditures beyond that what was discussed that evening. What is absent is a confirmation from, or not a confirmation, I'm at a loss for words, but a guarantee, I guess, from Commissioner Falanka, who is here, but Commissioner Salanitra, who's not, that they would not approve the acceptance of a grant if the city of Rye would be in a position
if we would not be in a
if we would
position
not be in a
to fund.
position to fund it.
Debbie?
The most recent publishing of the agenda has those comments in the minutes.
I'm sorry, I'm looking at the printed page right here, but but so there's a new version that's not
Yeah,
this.
I'm startled that it was the printed page because it was my understanding that staff got help and published the newest version, which has that in it.
Sorry, I can go online and look. Can. Right. Thank you. Got it.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm sorry, I missed that.
I'm trying to understand, when you say you can't fund it, it's that you don't want to fund it. There's a difference between can't and don't want to, because obviously there are certain budgetary requirements that you have within the city, and I respect that. But there's also money that you're spending on certain things, and it's really all a choice, whether you want to fund it or you don't want to fund it.
Sure, city priorities. Right.
That's very much the case, and this wasn't approved by our city council when we took it to the city council several months ago. We made that point in discussion, and as a result, the other commissioners kindly agreed that if we didn't agree to fund, that they wouldn't try to force our funding. And I think that is what was stated at the time, and that's what's now accurately reflected in the minutes.
Yep.
Right, the minutes accurately reflect.
They do.
The minutes accurately reflect
The conversation.
the conversation at the meeting.
Correct. I can
Whether
make-
or not any commissioner chooses to vote a certain way when it's before them is up to the commissioner to do that, to change their mind or not. That is to be discussed at a later date. Right now, we're approving minutes. The minutes accurately reflect what was said at the meeting.
That's correct. I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. And now the October 15th minutes. Are there any changes or suggestions on those minutes? If not, may I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, and let me just state one thing. Going forward, I think many members of the commission and the various boards are aware, but let me just restate. The law does not require any discussion, excuse me, to be part of the minutes. The law requires that the business resolutions, et cetera, of the board at issue be accurately recorded. And as an addenda to that, minutes are not required to be approved by the board, any board. And I will send out an opinion of the Committee on Open Government so that everybody has a copy of that. I think that we record all of these meetings on video, and they are a matter of public record. And I think that to argue about what was said or not said at any particular meeting takes away from what we really need to get to. And so I believe in the future that we will only be recording what the action items are on any agenda going forward after this meeting.
I would like to respond to that. I spoke to Wade Beltramo today, the general counsel of the New York Conference of Mayors, and he confirmed that Gary's impression of the minimum the law requires is accurate. However, he also confirmed to me that most councils do try to keep a running account of important statements made during the discussion so that the minutes, as people read them, do reflect the discussion, and they don't have to go to video in order to figure out what happened at a meeting. And I would certainly urge this commission to follow what I believe is general practice across the state of New York and keep minutes that do try to reflect the discussion. Obviously, it's not going to be a transcription, but, and I understand it's a burden on Debbie acting as our secretary. But again, it is common practice. It's certainly what the city council, the city of Rye does. And again, I would hope this commission would do it.
Again, the formation of the minutes are the prerogative of the secretary of the meeting, and it will be up to Debbie to record the minutes as she sees fit. And if we will go forward and continue to approve the minutes, and if there are any addenda or changes, then the commissioners may make such a motion, and if a majority of the board approves that the addenda, then it will be included in the minutes.
I'd just like to make one comment, which is thank you for working through these with us. I do think, in every respect that where we had comments, these were items that were contingent to a vote. These were not, superfluous discussions that are, may or may not be included. I think they were integral components of, acceptance of a budget resolution. So whether or not we are taking discussion notes in the minutes, which I hope we do, I think that our comments were not, they were more substantive and would be required at a minimum by law. So I'm glad we got them in there.
Well, the minutes are approved, and we'll see what happens going forward. Let's go on to the management report and the tree lighting flyer, which we all have up in front of us. And I know that we'll incorporate, even though it is an agenda item, we'll incorporate public comment on that. And I know that Jamie would like to speak to this.
Hi, Jamie Jensen, 588 Forest. I wanted to take a quick moment to speak as a Rye City resident, park advocate, and hopefully a good neighbor to the park in our community. The Fall Festival was a wonderful, successful event that brought communities across your 4 villages and towns to represent and draw folks from across the county. The holiday tree lighting, scheduled for December 7th, is your next scheduled event. This will certainly be another time when locals living near the park and hopefully from across Rye, Rye Neck, Rye Brook, and Portchester will join the celebration. The tree lighting is so festive, and it's fitting with what I like to think of the season of lights. It's also important to many in Rye that we are careful in how we market community events. There is so much that is wonderful about the holiday season in December, and I urge the park staff and commission to make sure that park-sponsored events are perceived as welcoming to all. Personally, I wish you had chosen to name the event a holiday tree lighting, but unfortunately, like so many of us, we don't always get what we want. Nevertheless, I wanted to state today that the tree lighting, the singing, all the good cheer that you hope to share on December 7th is extended to all those who do not celebrate Christmas. So much of the season is a celebration of the warmth that light brings during the winter solstice, and that warmth and spirit of the season should be something that everyone in the community feels, not just those who celebrate Christmas. Sharing the wonders of our interfaith communities with each other is so very important, and anything park staff can do to make the event more welcoming would be really important. And I, for one, am happy to help, so call on me.
Thank you, Jamie. Very well said. And the park is welcoming to all. And just as a matter of public record, I personally reached out to other groups to see if they would like to have holiday events at the park. I don't think we have any yet, but I have reached out, and hopefully some others will also use our beautiful park as a venue for celebration.
I also reached out, Gary, and I'd like to note that we did receive a a memo from Rye City Councilwoman Danielle Tager Epstein reporting comments that she has received from those in the community concerned about the inclusiveness of the event. I'm not sure that reaching out to the organized elements of religions is necessarily the way to go. That is, they may not have what they consider an appropriate response. I know that some in the Jewish community, for instance, consider a menorah lighting a religious event and not a community event, and therefore perhaps would not want to have it in this context. I don't know what other religious communities might think, but without perhaps inviting or along with inviting others to hold events representing their religions, perhaps we can run with Jamie's suggestion in the future that if this tree lighting is the park's event, that we call it a holiday tree lighting, and that we don't, by labeling it a Christmas tree lighting, make it the event of one religion.
I'm totally in agreement with you, but without getting into personalities, we did have somewhat of a discussion with the original sponsor of this event.
Right.
And I really don't want to air that in public, but I'll be happy to discuss that with you privately. So,
Gary, let me
Jeffrey?
just from a from a legal standpoint, lest anyone have any concerns, I think I said this last year and maybe the year before, that Christmas trees, menorahs, Santa Claus, these images of the holidays have, by the Supreme Court, been characterized as secular enough, and therefore they don't violate the Establishment Clause, and it's okay. This has, this is parallel to your discussion about inclusiveness, but lest anyone feel that we're crossing the line between the separation of church and state, the Supreme Court has said that we are not.
As a lawyer, I certainly appreciate and respect what you said, but will also echo your thought that it is parallel to the discussion of inclusiveness.
you have something, Bill?
One event that we can all participate in without any concerns about this is the cleanup. We're having a beach cleanup, right?
Yeah.
Get ready for the holiday season. So that's on Saturday, December 14th, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. And you can just show up. If you go to our Facebook, there's a way you can indicate that you are coming, but you can come even if it's at the last minute. And we invite everybody to join in. I think it is it's a good cause. It's something that helps all of us enjoy the beaches of Rye, so we should all promote that.
Great, thank you.
So with respect to this, we do a Christmas tree lighting here in Rybrook. We also do a menorah lighting literally next to it. You're never going to please everybody. And while I respect that some people want holiday trees, some people want Christmas trees, I personally am Jewish. I have no problem with it being a Christmas tree. It is a Christmas tree. But, I guess the world, this world has become so politically correct that you're just never going to please everybody in this. And when we do the menorah lighting, we get, at the same time as the Christmas tree lighting, I get complaints. When we do the menorah lighting on a Friday night, we get complaints because it's the Sabbath. When we move things around, we get complaints for other reasons. And it is what it is, and, you're just never going to please everybody.
And I think you're right. I think I have previously set forth the attitude of all of us. It's a public park, and it should be enjoyed by the public. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, and I think you're alluding to this, Paul, with thin skin about their stuff or somebody else's stuff. And I think we all need to get over it somewhat. My view is if a group wants to enjoy the park, a religious group or a non-religious group or a non-religious group that wants to celebrate somewhat of a religious item, it's fine. as long as we're being inclusive and not telling anybody you can't do it, I think we're on the right path.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I think we were put in a tough position when we were asked to accept the proposal, which I accepted, enthusiastically because it is such a beautiful presentation of the holiday season. And so, I just want to commend the commission for trying to be sensitive and continuing with something that's beautiful and festive and encouraging people to come to the park. And, in next year, maybe we push back a little bit on, what it's called.
Next year is another year. We
Yeah.
learn every year from our experiences. And let's move on. Before we get to the actual management report, let's talk about the sustainability poster program. I know I've seen it. Debbie, would you explain what these posters mean and why it's on our agenda?
Our park director, Russell Gold, can really speak to that. I'd like to invite him up to speak about it.
Russell, come speak about the sustainability poster program.
This is not the, it's the one with the high school student, right? Oh, okay. I just never heard the term in these states.
Come.
Everyone did,
Oh, I looked at the poster and I named it.
Hi. So it was a few weeks ago that a high school student whose name I will not try to pronounce because it's very long and sounding very Greek, and I'm sure I'll butcher it. Her first name is Aristia, and then a long Greek name. Anyway, it was her, and she and a couple of her classmates are fresh Rye High School freshmen, and they're in their science class. And they've taken on a project where they want to bring additional awareness to the problems of polluting our oceans and our seas with plastic. Okay, and we all know that's a very serious thing, and it's something that needs to be addressed. I asked them to put together some samples for us, which they just submitted to me the other day, and they want permission to hang them or display them in various places in the park. So I've been keeping Debbie apprised of what the situation is, and now they're ready to go, and I informed the students that I'm happy to work with them over the coming days to work with them about numbers of posters and where they might best be displayed. And it's really to bring awareness to the ever-increasing plastic pollution in our oceans.
And where are the posters going to go?
We haven't yet determined. I don't know the size of them yet, so I.
The material.
They can be parts, right, so we have to figure out places that they won't get damaged by,
The elements.
we certainly have the,
And not made of plastic, right?
bulletin
Not made
boards.
of plastic.
Yeah, little pieces, walls come together, no. I don't know what the medium is. However, we did, there's an example on Jeff's computer. Is that right, Jeff?
Is it the turtle?
Yeah, there's a couple, and they have a couple of different versions.
Yeah,
So,
It should be in your binders as well.
I see them.
so when you
Page 35.
when you come down to visit the park, and I hope you will during the off season, I expect to see all of you regularly. You don't be surprised if you see these things. So we have display cases, which that's not what they're called. Yeah, okay, cabinets. One's on the porch of the admin building. Another one is in the. There's one sort of at Middle Beach, and there's one up on the north end, and at park entrances, and then there's the one that's in front of the bathhouse, the more substantial one that's made of wood with a roof. Okay, so you'll start to see those things, and I think it's great, and that the kids are involved, and that they came up with this idea on their own.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Russ. The management report, I just wanted to point out something. It's-
Questions? If you have any questions, I'll hang around.
No?
No, you don't?
Oh, about the management?
Yeah.
You can hang around. As was previously stated, the highlights, we have 3 upcoming events. The Turkey Trot on November 30th, tree lighting on December 7th, and the beach cleanup on December the 14th. I wanted to bring everybody up to date. It's mentioned in the management report. The roof on the beach house is nearing completion. I spoke to Lisa today, and we're very hopeful that it'll be completely finished by December 1st. They've had some delay because of the weather, but it's mostly done, and she is projecting December 1st for that. The seawall, if anybody has been out to the beach, the seawall has been demolished, or at least the parts that have to be reconstructed have been demolished, and they're getting ready to put the micropiles on, which serve as the base for the concrete cap.
Pile driving starts tomorrow and it's supposed to go for about 11 days, they tell us.
I think the material is going to be delivered tomorrow, and the actual driving will be on Thursday.
Yeah.
So,
We
and
met-
you're right, it
when we met on
goes, it'll
Monday,
go
they said
for
they
11
hope
to
to go.
14 days, depending on what they find underneath.
That's correct.
And then they put a cap, and then the wall gets
Reassembled.
rebuilt.
Just so you know, those guys show up every single day.
Good.
Doesn't matter, rain, shine, cold,
Yeah.
warm, doesn't matter,
We've
those
been,
guys. and they've been-
we are appreciative of the fact that they, I know that we've gone through several bid openings, and we finally got to MTS, and we had some concerns, but they seem to be doing a really good job in doing this work. The next step in our capital work is actually,
I just wanted to add to that, Gary. You had inquired there was a Verizon pole that was in the way of the construction, and I spoke with the Verizon engineer who we've been working with, and the stub pole is gone, and it's his plan that it not be replaced.
okay, good.
He was checking out what actually was happening on the ground, but you asked if the pole would be reinstalled in the way, and it doesn't look like it will be.
Okay, good. That's good news. And the contractor's worried about that, too. The ramps are undergoing a redesign, and I'm very hopeful that the actual cost of construction is going to come down substantially as a result of that, and we'll know better in a week or so. And we are scheduled to find out what happened with the grants that we applied for sometime in mid-December, and then we'll better be able to judge what our capital obligations may be, or not, if we don't get any grants. And that's the up-to-date on the capital. Russ, you have anything else to add in the management report that you want to highlight?
No, just that we've been fortunate that we had enough money in the budget to keep our maintenance staff on longer in the year, and they've been able to take over some of the jobs that we had previously subbed out. So it's going to be saving us quite a bit of money. And one of the examples of that is that we are in the process of planting the 10 trees that we got from the New York Power Authority grant. We put 4 in yesterday, and the rest are going to go in over the coming days before the maintenance staff goes off for the season, which will be just the Monday after Thanksgiving.
Okay, great. Thank you, Russ.
Yeah, Russ, just a quick thank you. You've done an amazing job this year, and I'm so happy that you accepted this crazy position. And thanks for
Don't
all your
forget
hard
Vic.
work.
Don't forget
And
Vic.
Vic, of course.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank
And
you.
our security captain.
Everybody,
Right.
under your great leadership.
Thank you.
Great job.
I have one thing that I want to add. After a number of conversations with plumbers who had a lot to do with the park, we are going to return to the pre-2010 practice of trying to keep the bathrooms open through the winter.
Wow.
I understand that up until somewhere in the middle of the Carver administration, they had always been kept open through the winter. We have put together a plan that will not add any money to the budget. We will be spending the same amount on the maintenance of the building, and the staff who would normally be working at this time of year will essentially have worked out a rotation for opening every morning at 8 in the morning and closing up the bathrooms at dusk.
Excellent.
And so the bathrooms are just heated in the ordinary course?
That's correct. It's the only building on the campus with heat. But that's always been the case. And we were advised that for the health of the building and for the health of the pipes that go through it, we should keep the heat on. We always have at a low level, and we'll continue to do that. And there's a door for each of the bathrooms where the whole parade of stalls are open. But if you close that door, there's a single stall that's available, and that's what we're going to do.
I don't think it's used a lot in the wintertime, but you have people who walk their dogs or just walk through the park.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, and if they need to use the facilities, it's going to be good that the
Sledding.
facilities are there.
We have the staff, and we're going to give this a try. Hopefully, it will work. I can't. And also, I would mention that the polar bear plunge people, I think, might be quite pleased.
Isn't that how they warm themselves up?
If it's cold enough, nobody gets warm.
Yeah.
So it depends. We have also in our packet the draft financial statement through September 30th. I would rather not go through that because it's still a draft, and at our next meeting, we should have much better figures to see where we are. We're obviously not going to be getting any more revenue in, and hopefully our expenses will be somewhat reduced and going down. The major revenue we'll be getting in, I guess, is from the restaurant on their monthly allotment towards their minimum, and also whatever they're making, a percentage of what they're making on their sales.
I'd also mention that not reflected in here is the revenue from the kayak concession, which will be added in. We received that check in October, so that will appear in the next financial statement, and also the Fall Festival.
Okay.
Did the kayakers have a good year?
Yeah, they had a pretty good year. Yep, they surpassed their minimum.
And are they interested in coming back? Do we know?
Yes, and it's the concession was a multi-year.
A multi-year, okay.
Good. Okay, that's good news. All right, and now the highlight of the evening, Elon. A presentation, another presentation of our sale and revenue analysis and fee alternatives. I don't expect that everybody would have devoured this report. I want to commend Elon on the great work that he's done putting it all together. And we're going to try to figure out what it all means. But the main goal is to determine as early as possible what our fee schedule should be for the year 2020 and whether any of them should be raised or lowered. And I know that Mayor Falanka has some ideas about it, and I guess every community is affected slightly differently by the fees. So, Elon, it's yours.
Thank you so much. And I do want to echo that and just mention that for tonight's purpose, this presentation, it's not really about the detail of each of the scenarios. It's more about taking this after tonight into the budget cycle, just as President Zuckerman said. So going into this. All right. I should also clarify, I'm not an economist. I do play at one on TV, but but I will go into a little bit of economics just for the purpose of this presentation. But it's not going to be a college course. But essentially, what you're going to find with each of these scenarios in the report that was published in the agenda is you're going to find when the price increased for this year, demand did go down. How that affects revenue kind of varies, and you're going to see that in this presentation. But the important thing to remember with each of these bars is the top one is the 2019 fees. The second line is the 0 daily beach fee, as was discussed in the last meeting. and every other scenario below that is a mixture of the average revenue and permits sold for the past 3 years, or another scenario where it's $5 and $10 for residents, as opposed to 10 and 15, which was this year, or $7 and $8, which was in the previous years.
Let me just interrupt you. These revenue figures do not include non-beach and non-parking revenue. For example, the restaurant concession is not included here.
Correct.
The kayaking concession is not included here. We're just looking at permits and the daily beach and parking fees.
That is correct. That is correct. So going into specifically revenue from the beach passes, I kind of put the two columns on the right to help with the comparison. But as I mentioned about a minute ago, when the prices were high this year, you did end up with a pretty high amount of revenue coming from residents, which means that the demand was there. People were paying the higher fees. Going to the next line, obviously, if you make the daily beach fee zero, you're going to get zero revenue from it. But going into the next slide, when I show demand, there's going to be an adverse reaction to it. And obviously, the following lines towards the bottom show more of an average. The bottom line is a mixture that I composed based on these scenarios, where essentially, rather than $7 and $8 or $5 and $10 or 10 and 15, I take the two best ones that I calculated revenue and beach and unit sales units, and basically come up with a unique mixture. And so I calculated that we would get a lot more revenue if we had a middle ground of about $7 for weekday and $10 for weekends. This is for residents specifically, resident prices.
Question.
Sure.
This is page 44 and 50, which I'm looking at, which says resident daily beach pass revenue. Doesn't reflect the numbers you're showing up there.
Resident daily
Is it
beach
something
pass.
Yeah, that
different?
was you just on that page, where there was a zero daily beach fee
Are you,
there.
or is there another one that you prepared? Because this one is different than that.
Oh, I think,
Oh, that's
I'm,
something else.
Did
I'm
you
looking at
switch?
page
I mean,
44.
I'm looking what's in our booklet.
I'm looking at page 44 of 50, page
it.
5 of the presentation. And I see,
Yeah, I'm looking at the bottom line. But it's, it's the same heading. I'm just trying to say what's the difference between what I'm seeing on the screen and what I have in my booklet.
You changed slides.
Yeah, I know. I just,
That's page 6 of 11.
well, I looked through it all, and I still don't see that I still don't see that in our
That's not-
book.
Page 4450?
yeah, I have it as the same, page 44, 50.
I still don't see it.
That's page 5 of 11. And this is page 6 of 11. That's page 6 of 11 over here.
Oh, it is.
I don't have that.
That one.
I don't have the same.
Page 45, page 4450.
Yeah, but,
He developed a slide for presentation purposes.
no, I'm just trying to figure out what I'm looking at here and what I'm seeing on the screen.
So
I'm
the
just trying to
difference,
follow through the booklet.
I see, the difference,
Tell me the difference then.
the difference is on the right side, the two columns that show the dollar figures. Those are just prices. I added it in for the purpose of the presentation. It's not in,
It's not on.
The
it's
handouts.
it's not in the report itself, but it's just easier for the presentation. It just shows the price of the permit, of the beach passes. That's all. It doesn't affect the actual figures, for what each of the scenarios, yielded.
Are we ever gonna get something like that? Because I'd like to do when I take a look at this, to compare.
Absolutely. I'll send it right after the meeting.
Thank you.
So going into demand of the beach passes. 2019, there was a lower demand because of the higher fees. However, because of the way it ended up, despite having a decrease in unit sales, revenue still ended up higher, as you see in this slide, even though it was lower overall unit sales. If you make it for scenario B, if you make it $0, it's not really calculable how many you'll sell, but it's a pretty good guess that the number is going to go up. It's just an unknown increase right now because in recent years it's never been zero, but it definitely would go up if you make the beach free for residents. And then the rest of the lines are not that much of a change, but again, they're all similar fees between $7 or $8 or $5 and $10. So this slide and the next slide go a little bit into what Acting Commissioner Souza mentioned in the last commission meeting, where you're going to see that with the price increase, there will be lower unit sales. With a price decrease, there will be higher unit sales. So this shows the three different scenarios for weekend and holiday beach passes. If it's at $8 for a beach pass like it was in 2016, 17, and 18, on average there were about 4,425 beach passes that were sold. When you go all the way to the right at $15, it was lower. It was 3,969. Somewhere in the middle, I calculated based on elasticity, which demand elasticity that goes into the economics that I was talking about. Essentially, I was able to formulate that it would be about 4,355 beach passes sold if you make it $10, which it hasn't been in several years. And this is specifically for weekends and holidays.
Well, it hasn't been in several years, or it never has been?
I'm not sure what it was before 2016.
Okay.
It wasn't $10.
Well, because we know it was either $8 or $15.
Less.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyway, that's helpful.
And looking at the revenue side of that equation, basically just multiplying those unit sales by the price, you're going to see the opposite, which is with a higher price, revenue does go up. However, again, unit sales do go down. So you have that adverse reaction. But I calculated that, so $8, an $8 price between 2016 and 2018 on average was $33,400 each year from resident beach passes during the weekends and holidays. And this year it was $59,600 at the $15 rate.
It's just a challenge. You do want to see residents using the park.
Right.
But I mean, the numbers are compelling at $60,000 versus $33,000.
Right.
And even the 43 in the middle.
Right, exactly. And the impact of that on the decision that the commission has to make when it comes to the budget cycle is, does the commission want to go somewhere in the middle of this beach unit sales slide,
Right.
or somewhere in the middle between this revenue slide,
Right.
if the commission is considering lowering the fees? Some considerations just for the purposes of this presentation. Permit fee and sales analysis, it was limited for me when I was trying to do this, because ultimately what happened, it's not in this presentation, but it is in the report. You will find on the second to last page that unit sales for permits did not really change that much between 2016 and 18, which is scenario C, and 2019, which is scenario A. It went up approximately 39 permits for residents between 1812 and then 1851. That isn't enough data to really calculate elasticity for whether revenue goes up or down with I'm sorry, not revenue, whether demand goes up and down with the price increase or decrease. Revenue did go up because we sold approximately the same amount of permits
At a higher price.
at a higher price.
But I don't think we had the discrepancy in price with the permits that we did with the day passes, right? I mean, yeah.
Right. Another consideration, weather is always a factor.
We actually sold more.
Yeah, right.
Not a lot more, but more.
Right.
Right.
Interestingly, I mean, probably because the day passes were so much more. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe it was better marketing.
It could have been.
This report, though, looks only at resident sales, so what we're selling to a resident. So when we talk about revenue, we are still missing a big portion of revenue, which is the non-resident sale.
Right.
Yes, that's correct.
So when you see that decrease by, I think it's close to $26,000, when you're talking about in resident daily beach pass revenue for weekends and holidays, that huge gap between the $8, the 2016 price, and the 2019 price, which is close to 60,000.
Wait, what page are you on, Lindsay?
I'm on page 46.
46. Okay. Yeah.
What does that look like?
This one.
Have any models been done, or has any work been done to determine what the overall revenue gap would be, including the non-resident sales, so that we could better gauge?
The best I could do is refer you to the first slide, which is also the first chart in that report. That would show total revenue. However, nothing in this presentation or nothing in the analysis was considering changes in fees to non-residents. So that analysis could be done. What makes it also difficult is overall, after looking at the numbers, non-resident revenue ended up being about the same. It was about $728,000 came from non-residents.
Out of the 991?
Correct.
728.
728 approximately, and that was the same for every single scenario. So that was the same this year. That was the same in the last 3 years.
Without me doing the math, what is the percentage of total revenue that non-residents?
A lot.
Percentage of total revenue? Well, it would be
5%.
about 73%,
Yeah,
because it was about $1 million that the park made.
right. So assuming we keep the non-resident fees exactly the same, we can, depending on weather, of course, we can expect the same kind of a revenue figure.
Correct.
So reducing, if you kept the resident permit fees the same, which showed very little elasticity when we raised the fees, the number of permits were basically the same, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if we kept those fees the same and decreased the daily beach fees, parking fees, et cetera, we're not looking at a major revenue loss per se. I mean, we will see some possibly, but not a major loss. And on the other hand, we will increase the number of beachgoers,
Well,
if that's what our purpose is.
That is correct. If you look at scenarios, scenario A was this year. So if you look at, for example, scenario C was just a little bit of a loss. That was going back to what the prices were before this year. Scenario D is a kind of a mixture, and so is E. But they all float in the upper half of between $950,000 and $950,000 and $1 million. They all float around that area. So you could play around with some of the prices. Ultimately, you're going to be in that range, most likely.
Well, I think that part of the exercise we're looking at is the complaint, if you will, that it is too expensive for some of our residents to come to the beach, especially those in Portchester and some in Rhine Neck. Those complaints have come to us. So the question is what to do about it. And if the answer is to lower the fees for them, and that's a decision obviously the commission has to make, then the secondary question is by how much?
Right.
All right, do we go back, for example, we're not going to go to 0. We threw that out just as an exercise. But do we go back to what we charged from 16 to 18? Or do we come up with something between that number and what we charge for 19? The other part of it is, do we make a big difference between weekday and weekend? And I would submit that a great deal of our revenue comes from the 3 holiday weekends, Memorial
Yes.
Day, July 4th, and Labor Day. Am I correct?
Yes, I don't have the exact number, but it's
But it is substantial. So
absolutely.
that by keeping those rates relatively high, and of course, that's where there's a lot of demand, and that's where we have parking on the grass, by keeping those rates relatively high, we can maintain or even increase revenue and still decrease the fees both during the week and make the difference between the ordinary weekend and the weekday rates even a little bit less to encourage people to come to the beach more.
Right. That's definitely one of the considerations that the commission needs to think about after tonight and based on this
Yeah.
analysis.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would it be possible, since such a large portion of our revenue is based on those weekends or those, special holidays, what is the portion of our revenue that's based on the weekends? In essence, would you be adverse to keeping a special holiday price
I would support that.
while streamlining weekends?
Yeah, that's what I'm
Be-
suggesting.
Yeah, because I think a lot of residents want to go on an off weekend.
I'm concerned about the special holiday price. That is, I don't want a certain segment of the beach customer base to feel disenfranchised on the biggest weekends of the summer.
Again, Mayor, that's a question for us to decide.
Yeah.
It's a very valid question, balancing the need to increase beach participation with also the need to, to maintain revenue. Because the bottom line is, if the revenue goes down, then both the city and the town, would pick up,
Obviously.
Yeah.
that through their tax base.
I mean,
And
I
that's a
would-
decision for us to make.
I mean, I think I felt this intimately when I went to the beach at the end of, last week. I think it was October. It was one of those unseasonably warm weekends, and we were still open, and it was very late. And we went down there with some friends, and I had not bought a season pass. Shame on me. And we ended up spending like
It should be required.
I know, $60 to get, 4 adults onto the beach or something like that. And I remember thinking, like, God, this is really, seems like a lot. But for example, on a 4th of July weekend, I'm planning to go, I'm okay with the 2019 prices. So I understand your concern, Josh, but I also think, I'd love to lower the weekend prices on a regular basis and keep them higher for the holidays. Not higher than they have been.
Yeah, that's what I agree.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
And I'll just restate it. I don't think on the 4th of July we should have people feeling that they're priced out.
Right.
Okay, that's a reasonable position.
There's one consideration you may want to think about is starting next year, the restaurant will be sort of have a full-on season with their full operation.
Let's
might
charge
wanna
them
take that
more.
into account. Wait to see how it affects,
Well, Commissioner Falanka mentioned to me that possibly we could cordon off an area for the restaurant, because we give money back when, they park at the restaurant. And there may be another way of addressing that. I'm not saying that that's the only way, but there may be another way of addressing that.
Well, again, my opinion is last year was a rough year. We had all changes. And a new person that took over the restaurant. And I visited the beach frequently in the summer and just observed. And it seemed that every time I went there, and I have pictures, it was empty. I can't explain the emptiness of the beach versus the numbers that Ilona is showing, but I definitely was concerned when I seen no one on the beach. I did hear from Portchester residents that it was expensive, and I also heard it from out-of-towners that it was expensive. I know, how do we find that happy medium here that, you know, we don't put the burden back on the city of Rye or the town of Rye to make up the difference is important also. But I think we have to make the beach experience a pleasant one for our residents who pay taxes to the town of Rye, the village of Portchester, the city of Rye, and Rye Brook. Again, you know, the Portchester, makeup of a Portchester community and the medium income. So I'm very much concerned that it's affordable for the residents of Portchester. And I'll get some time to digest this, talk to some of the people that have complained to me and see what they think before I, make my comments to this commission, which is I think there needs to be some changes. I even think in the parking also. So that's my comment for tonight. But I certainly look forward to working with the board and coming up with a number that works for all of us to make the beach a pleasant experience for all of our residents, not only Portchesters, but everyone that's a part of the town of Rye.
Let me finish, Linz. That's the purpose of this exercise, which we've gone through now. I think this is the third time we've discussed it, because the entire purpose is for the commission to gain the knowledge that we can make an informed decision going forward next year. And each one of the 6 commissioners may have a slightly different idea about what we should do, and we need to meld those together and come up with a plan early. I don't mean in April, I mean in January, for example, going forward so that we can put it into effect. And,
Again, Gary, last year was a tough year. We hired a new manager of the beach, the new vendor at the restaurant, the parking situation changed. We had problems with signage. There were a lot of problems I saw in my visits to the beach. So again, I think working together, we can resolve a lot of these problems, and hopefully next year make it a pleasant experience. And plus, but almost to have it pay for itself, and where we don't have to go back to the town or the city to subsidize the beach. But again, I think there's some room here, and both in parking and in the fees for the beach that we can hopefully discuss in the coming month or two.
all right, good. Lindsay, you had something?
And just to reiterate what Mayor Falanca said, anecdotally, the complaints that I heard were primarily parking complaints. But I do want to get back to this revenue coming from non-residents. And, I would be interested to see where our fees, parking and beach admittance, is compared to some of our other local beaches, because I think that's something to take a look at, especially when you talk about, overcrowding at the beach. Maybe more residents would want to attend if there's more room there. So I think that's something that when you're looking at, attendance and getting more community participation, which is, I think, agreed among all the commissioners, that would be something that we want to look at as well.
That's a good idea to look at other, again, I think we've done it, looked at other surrounding communities, not only on the Sound Shore, but in Westchester, but also in Connecticut and on Long Island, and see exactly what they're charging.
Yes, that comparison can be done. There's going to be several caveats with that, such as, population density, how many people are living, in Oyster Bay compared to the area that encompasses the town of Rye, and also different socioeconomic attributes and other things. So the analysis can be done, but there's going to be some asterisks to it, as there usually is. But I can see what I can pull from those other beaches. If they have those reports available, I can definitely come back the next time around with some sort of comparison. Before we end it, I do just want to put on a couple of recommendations I had. This is just based on this data. At some point, I actually did consider, what would happen if we look at three different rates: holiday, weekend, and weekday. But that would have to wait until the next presentation to actually see how that would play out if the commission would like that. But my primary recommendations, based on demand, based on revenue, it looks like $7 on weekdays, which was in the 2016-18 rates, and then $10 on the weekend and holiday, which is going to be a brand new rate, might yield the best mixture of sales and revenue. The other thing is explore decreasing the permit prices just to measure demand. Like I said before, we did sell more permits this year, but only slightly more. And I would encourage the commission to look at the possibility of maybe lowering the permit prices, even just a little bit, just to see if the demand shifts. It's up to the commission whether or not they want to. Obviously, there's good reasons to keep the prices the way they are. There's also good reasons to lower them, but it's really up to the commission how they want to make that decision.
As you say, though, the permit prices are relatively inelastic. So I see less reason to decrease them because, unless you get a substantial number of permit increases to make up for the loss of revenue. But if it's going to remain constant, there's less of a reason to decrease it. And the reason we need the permits is so that we have money in the bank starting the season with people buying permits before they're going to the beach.
That is true.
So, all right. Sure you can, Jamie.
Say it really fast. People don't go to the beach alone. So I'm wondering if there's a way in which you can do something that goes beyond an individual and looks at family. So one of the things I said when the state rejected the 16-year-olds can't go to the beach by themselves, remember when you all unanimously supported that and then we turned around and saw the state law? If 16-year-olds...
14-year-olds.
14-year-olds. If 14-year-olds aren't allowed to go to the beach without a parent, when are we going to say, well, how about if everybody under 14 goes for free and we test the zero rate with the children of the families, 14 and under, and then you begin to sort of look at the equity issue and the fairness issue. Sort of, you're planning to go, you're a family of 4, you're planning to go to the beach. It's the $60, not the $15. So if you pay the expensive permit price, your driver gets for free. You're a resident, you end up only paying for one adult. Your kids are going in free and your driver's going in based on the parking fee. To me, that feels like you begin to have a conversation. I don't know how you look at that.
Well, right now, they go free for under what age?
12.
12. So what you're saying is changing it from 12
She's basically saying 12 to 15.
to 15.
16-year-olds, you have to be 16 to go onto the beach.
Right, and you might be driving yourself. Right. Right. That's an item for discussion.
I think also, just to add some light to some clarification to this discussion, Debbie and I are also looking at better ways in future years to track people who come into the beach and track where they're coming from, what age they are, if they want to register that, and track the different, socioeconomic and other characteristics of our visitors, of residents, non-residents, people, customers who come to the beach, to be able to make more accurate
Use
analyses.
the word
and make
clients, not customers.
I'm sorry?
Clients.
Clients.
Clients who come to the beach.
clients,
Guests.
stakeholders,
Guests even better.
stakeholders.
Guests, yes, guests who come to the beach.
Aren't we already able to do it by digital?
Depends on what you're purchasing. So if you're going anything online, yes, you have to put your zip code in. If you use MPay to park, yes, you have to put your zip code in. If you go up to the concession stand, or not the concession stand, if you go, yes, if you go to the kiosk, it depends. If you're using credit card, there's some information that we can get from that without being too intrusive that we can then analyze. If you're paying with cash, there's no way to track. Yes.
We're trying.
The cash goes into the kiosks, and that will always be an option.
Right. Elon?
What?
Yes. The other thing that we're having a little bit of difficulty tracking is how many times a permit holder actually comes to the beach. You know, all. We wouldn't have been able to track that anyway.
That was a technology glitch that we hope to have resolved for next year.
Correct.
When you had a permit to get on the beach, it had to be scanned, and that should have been a data point. And however, it didn't work as well as we had hoped to, and we're working on a solution for that now.
And it will be something to look at for next year, definitely.
All right. Elon, thank you very, very much for this presentation. I know you put a lot of work into it. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item, I think we have a beach report of sorts from Barley, do we? Bobby? I meant, I'm sorry,
Barley Beach.
Barley
House.
Beach. Thank you, Emily. Barley Beach.
Hey guys, Bobby Harris from the Barley Beach House. Debbie, I just sent you over an update on the sign. We just got a graphic. We have a sign guy redoing the Town Park sign and adding your logo as well as ours. And I just got the mock-up moments before the meeting, so I sent that over to Debbie. Okay. Otherwise, it's our first year being open this time of year, and it's kind of rough, kind of slow. We're doing everything we can to build business. We're changing our menu to have more comfort foods, warm foods. We got the heat system blasting, all day and all night to keep it nice and warm in there. But it's been slow, so it's our hope to get enough parties and private events and bookings in December, January, and February to kind of keep us going through the slow season, keep people employed, keep people working, and roll smoothly into the next season.
I think you need to advertise that. I
So-
don't think anybody knows you're open.
We advertise with Yelp, Facebook, the Rye Record, and I think Amy just sent something to a local church bulletin.
You should, Rye Record is good, but you should do the West Bar News as well.
Okay, good to know. I'll have her do that.
We should put it on,
So he just basically took your sign there and added our logo. So it's all on one sign. We'd be replacing the current sign.
I like Rye-Town Park larger than Barley Beach House.
That's not what I was told. I said 50-50 from Debbie, but
It's not
you
either.
guys can be bigger. That's fine.
We
I
can,
really
we can
don't care
talk about it. Okay. At least it's on one sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we were thinking about putting that in the spring. So I know
We can look at it, we
Debbie had
don't have to
mentioned you guys
analyze it
wanted to
now.
maybe redo your logo or something. So we've got time for that. But
I would love to redo the logo, but we have other things.
plenty of other things to work on.
I think you should say on that sign, open all year round.
Yeah,
You know what it is? Honestly, we're feeling it out right now. It's slow over there. There's not a lot of foot traffic. So
we have to make it a destination. People have to want to go there. You have to make me want to come from Rybrook to go to the Barley Beach House
We're
instead
trying,
of going to another restaurant.
honestly, it takes a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth. Like from our other restaurants, they never came there once because the parking and everything else, and so they still have that. Even though it's free parking, we're like trying to let everyone know, like now's the time to come. It's free parking.
I think you should do something. You should put it on our website.
Yeah.
Okay, we can put it out, right, Debbie? We can put it on the website.
Thank you.
On the website, so people who go to the Rye-Town or Rye-Town Park Commission website could see Barley Beach House, now open all year,
Yeah. So
free parking.
Yeah, we can definitely get that going. We just changed our website so we have more control of it, so we can put up specials daily and stuff.
Well,
so
you
people go to our
put a
website.
link, work with Debbie and our people to
That'd be
put a
great,
link
yeah.
from our website, so people who are on there and say, oh, Barley Beach House, they click on it, and they pop to your website.
That'd be great. Yeah, love to be able
It's
to.
not hard to do.
I don't know how to do it.
We want to help you, because we
No,
want you to make a
appreciate it.
lot of money.
We're trying.
so that we can get our percentage.
Yeah, we're getting close to that number to hit above the minimum.
Good.
We're doing that breakfast with Santa. We're hoping that
No, thank you.
that gets people in. I think 3 of the dates are fully booked already, so
Good.
that's something that
Do you
we
mean
can
do you mean the tree lighting, or is there a second breakfast with Santa?
So we're doing 6 dates or 8 dates, I believe, in December, where you do brunch with Santa. You get your picture taken with Santa. It's $20 for a brunch, and then you can.
I'm hearing great things about the brunch.
Yeah, so it's, we just think this is still a building year for us, but it'd be very nice to roll into next year, with our current staff and menu in place and everything. Just get a nice early start and hopefully get well above that minimum number.
All right, great.
Right.
Thank you, Bobby.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, is there anything else? Anybody else from the public who hasn't spoken, would they like to speak? And members of the commission, anything to say? Okay, the last thing is, our next meeting is scheduled for December the 17th.
December what?
Two things. Other than I'm really hopeful that we will be at Crawford Park. Secondly, the town council meeting is December the 10th. It's not the same day because we have to pass our budget by the 15th by law. So having the town council meeting on the 17th would not be a good thing. So I'd like you to consider two things. Number one is, if you have the 10th available, we could meet on that date. We have a board meeting. So that ends that. So it'll be on the 17th unless I am considering canceling that meeting if we don't have important business. The law requires us to have a meeting through November. It does not require us to have a meeting in December or January. We will have a meeting in January because we have to start to talk about the year coming. But I want to leave the meeting at the 17th for now and advise the board a week or so before that we could cancel the meeting. Is that acceptable?
That's fine.
Totally.
Very good. Okay, with that, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.